Thank you very much, Catherine. Bonjour. I'm a Quebecer, so bonjour. Good morning, everyone. We've been on a roll here this morning. Merci encore une fois aux panélistes pour la discussion qu'on vient d'avoir sur le cadre de croissance municipale. Vos perspectives sur cet enjeu ont été vraiment intéressantes. Je suis heureux de maintenant passer la présentation de notre prochain invité, une personne qui lui aussi se penche sur les façons de bâtir un avenir meilleur pour notre population canadienne. Scott Aitchison is MP for the riding of Parry Sound, Muskoka in Ontario, Shadow Minister for Housing, Inclusion, Diversity, and a leading member of the Conservative Party of Canada. I'm also happy to say he is a man who has spent plenty of time in municipal politics, has dedicated years to serving his community, and who can relate to the goals that local leaders gathered here today are working towards. He is a veteran of local government, having himself been elected for the first time in Huntsville Town Council in 1994 to become the youngest ever member of that municipal council. If memory serves me, he was elected, he was 21 years old. Then he went on to become mayor of Huntsville, serving in that role from 2014 to 2019. And he's since gone to become a high-profile member of the Federal Conservative Party of Canada and plays an active role in the housing file as that party anticipates the next federal election. The Conservative Party of Canada has always warmly engaged with FCM and our delegates at the annual conference. And Scott appeared at our Advocacy Days event last year. We were happy to welcome as well co-deputy leader Melissa Landsman to the annual conference main stage last year as well. The Conservative Party of Canada has always appreciated the importance of grassroots support and the key day-to-day issues in Canadians' lives. Here in the municipal sphere, we get that. We are the closest to the issues, we are the closest to the people, and we're often the closest to the solutions. As a former councillor and mayor, I'm sure Scott can appreciate that. He knows FCM is comprised of our members from every kind of community across this great country. In the current context of Canada's record growth, as FCM continues to push for support for a new municipal growth framework, we intend to engage and discuss with all stakeholders across the orders of government to build a better, more robust, and long-term framework for our growing communities. That includes our federal counterparts, and that's why Scott's engagement and perspective with FCM, this conference, and the frontline municipal officials here today is so appreciated. He's been a proponent of robust, honest discussion all his career, and we certainly welcome that today. And I can tell you this, that he is a true friend of the FCM. He was one of us. He was a municipal person for a very long time, and he gets it. So it's my pleasure to introduce to you the Honorable Scott Aitchison.
Hello. I want to thank the FCM and all you amazing members for inviting me to the great city of Calgary. I love it here. I'm sure you're all having a great time. Many of you will actually be quite familiar with the region that I represent in the House of Commons. Parry Sound, Muskoka is famous for the rugged, rocky shores of Georgian Bay and the thick expanse of forests dotted by lakes, many of them, of course, surrounded by very expensive vacation homes. The region is quite often seen as a playground for the rich, and it is. It's also a community of communities, though, and it's a place where there are a lot of hardworking folks just trying to make a living, and a lot of those jobs in the region are seasonal, somewhat precarious. The median income in my community is 20% below the provincial average of Ontario. And so adequate housing in my riding, like the rest of Canada, has become a pipe dream. This really isn't normal in Canada. We used to have a deal in this country. You worked hard, you picked up a trade, a degree, you saved, and you saved. And it wasn't necessarily easy, but a home at the end of the road was going to be waiting for you. It was possible. That was the deal. But after 9 years of Trudeau's plans, rent has doubled, mortgage payments have doubled, and that promise feels broken for a whole generation of Canadians. Nurses and carpenters are living in their cars because even a regular job doesn't cut it anymore to support the cost of living increases. We see young people who are unable to live in the neighborhoods they grew up in, and middle-class Canadians who now struggle to pay their mortgages. And of course, the most vulnerable in our society are relegated to shelters and street corners. And I don't need to tell any of you about tent cities that aren't just in big cities anymore. They're everywhere. They're popping up in every municipality. And for buying a home, it's a whole generation that's just given up on that. Today, we're at a point in Canada where the biggest factor that determines whether you can buy a home is not the job you have. It's not the income you make. It's not the degree you've earned. It's certainly not the dirt on your boots or the calluses on your hands, but it's how rich your parents are. And I'm sure you're all familiar with that. According to the RBC, it now takes 70.2% of median household income to make payments on the average single-family home's mortgage. The Fraser Institute points out that taxes now consume more than 45% of household income for the average Canadian family. Now, I'm no mathematician, and I'm sure there's not a lot of them in the room, but it doesn't take really difficult math to realize that these numbers just don't add up. And that's just for the basic necessities. We're not talking about getting ahead here. We're talking about just paying for the basics. It never used to be that way. For decades, that promise that I mentioned earlier, it worked. It held up. We could make it work. So how do we get here? There are many problems. There are many reasons for the housing crisis we face, and it's been growing for years. And I know that also the 9 years of inflationary spending and constantly increasing carbon tax. I hope when the Prime Minister's here, you ask him how much the carbon tax has added to the cost of municipal projects and how much more it costs to build homes. It's doubling of the national debt. It's all making everything more expensive, and it's making it bad to build. Provincial land use guidelines have not really kept up with rapid growth, and municipal red tape keeps many new projects on paper instead of in the ground. Government at every single level makes housing more expensive. In Canada's two most populous provinces, government taxes, charges, fees, they all add over 30% to the cost of every single unit of housing. So the truth is, no one makes more money on housing than governments. To put this into context, in Canada, we tax housing kind of at the same rate we tax cigarettes and booze. You know how we used to call those the sin taxes? Really shouldn't be a sin to live in a home of your own. The Trudeau government has talked a lot about housing. We just heard Minister Fraser here, and it's all very positive. Back in 2017, they announced their housing strategy, the National Housing Plan. Prime Minister Trudeau stood in front of a big construction project, lots of workers around him, and announced this, what he called life-changing, transformational national housing strategy. Well, that transformation 5 years later has doubled home prices, doubled rent. Millions of Canadians who are headed to the bank this year, well, they're not sure if they can afford their home anymore. This past summer, the Prime Minister announced a whole new plan for housing. This one was going to be the most ambitious plan ever. Many of you are familiar with one of the elements of that plan, the Housing Accelerator Fund. This is a $4 billion fund doled out to cities based on agreements that those cities will speed up the development process. Many cities represented here today have gotten those deals and gotten some money out of that process. Some cities in their plans have planned to hire more planning staff. Most have agreed to Minister Fraser's sort of key demand, it seems, from most of them to permit 4 residential units as of right in any residential zone. He seems to believe, I guess, that this fourplex idea is going to make some kind of a silver bullet kind of difference, despite You know, the evidence that does exist already. The City of Toronto has permitted fourplexes now for just over a year, or about a year. In that time, they've received, I think, about 74 applications to make the transition. So, you know, it's not a silver bullet. Inexplicably, this $4 billion taxpayer fund has zero requirements to reduce the cost of government in getting more homes built. And let's be honest, any program that tries to make housing more affordable but doesn't tackle the 30% cost of government in home building is doomed to fail. So let's just look at how the Liberal plan has worked. Give you a couple of examples. The City of Toronto, they've received almost $500 million, $471 million. And then they turned around and increased development charges on single-family homes from $97,000 to $117,000. That's an increase of over 20%. I was picking on the City of Ottawa. I had a meeting with the mayor this morning to talk about it some more, but the City of Ottawa received $178 million in housing accelerator funds. They proposed a 28% increase in development charges, though they did generously reduce that to an 11% increase. The City of Winnipeg is another example of a city, received $122 million, and then they denied approval of a plan to build 1,900 homes next to a transit station on lands obtained from the city for housing. It is perverse to me that the federal government would give tax dollars to cities to help build more homes only to see those cities make it more expensive to build more homes. I say that's similar to what former Liberal Finance Minister John Manley called driving your car with one foot on the gas and one foot on the brake at the same time. Doesn't really work. And cities are too slow to approve new housing. Canada is 34th out of 35 OECD comparator nations to approve building permits. On average, it takes 249 days to get a building permit approved in Canada, compared to an average of 81 days in the United States. The CMHC reports that we need to build almost 6 million homes by 2031 just to restore affordability, to restore that promise of opportunity, to restore the dream of home ownership that a generation of Canadians are currently locked out of. And so the current Liberal plan amounts, in my estimation, to not much more than photo ops to announce Pay for Promises Fund. So, what's the solution? Well, I'm happy to report that when Pierre Poilievre is Prime Minister, we will take a different approach. And I promise, we will do our part at the federal level. First, we will fix the fiscal mess of money printing, excessive borrowing by the Trudeau government, which has caused inflation and a spike in interest rate and continued uncertainty in the markets. Second, we will axe the carbon tax that makes everything more expensive, including materials for home building. And we will also cut the wasteful spending, like $20 billion in consultants, the multi-million-dollar Rise scam, among all the other little projects. Things like these sole source contracts for liberal insiders, the $30 billion infrastructure bank that is yet to build any infrastructure. And I promise, we will reform the Canada Mortgage and Housing Corporation from an institution of paperwork, bureaucracy, process, and delays to the Get Homes Built Corporation. And we'll do that by putting excessive bonuses and salaries on the line until we meet a 60-day response for municipal applications. And we will be there to help cities as well. We will help you reduce the local cost of building and the all too painfully slow process of getting approvals. On subway projects, LRT projects, rapid bus routes and other transit projects, we will require, we won't ask nicely, we won't beg, we will require that the land around those projects for high-density transit will be zoned and ready to go for high-density residential before federal money flows to the projects. Targets for housing will be set. And if cities are beating their targets, they will be rewarded. And they will love a Pierre Poilievre Prime Minister. Cities that make it more expensive or miss their housing completion targets will lose federal transfers. And I'll tell you, we don't need to tell you what to build. You know that. We don't need to dictate from Ottawa how cities should use your local planning tools to speed up the process and get the job done. You know that too. So do it. And reap the rewards of a federal infrastructure money in the thriving communities that new homes bring and the opportunity and prosperity for all generations. Don't do it, and you won't receive any federal transfers. There'll be no more federal transfers for well-written staff reports full of great ambition on housing. There'll be no more federal transfers for cities that increase the cost to build homes. There'll be no more federal transfers to cities that don't meet their targets. Pierre Poilievre government will reward results. Full stop. And we invite municipal leaders to join us as we form a new Conservative government, hopefully very soon, to reduce the burden of government at all levels, weighing down our economy, making it too expensive for Canadians, and frankly, stealing the dream of home ownership from a whole generation. Cities and towns in every part of Canada are on the front lines of the housing crisis, but they're also absolutely crucial to the solution of the housing crisis. The hopes and dreams of young people depend on it. The promise of Canada is slipping away from them, and we cannot wait any longer. The next generation are depending on us. The next generation of Canadians are depending on you. Our future depends on you. And we will work together to get the job done, build the homes that Canadians need, and get this country moving again. Thank you very much. I might be in trouble here, I don't know.
I just wanted to say a few things before we leave for now, but obviously you know how much I appreciate you as a leader. I think municipalities do a great job, generally speaking, and we have to live with something we call in municipal, you know this, social acceptability. So it's not that cities and towns don't want to do the housing. I saw a project recently, and it was in Ontario. It was a beautiful residential neighborhood on the lake, and the project was a 10-story high-rise that would block the view for all those residents who paid taxes for 40 years. So the municipality said no. It's not they didn't want the housing, but it just wasn't a good project. So sometimes it may seem that municipalities aren't trying to get the housing built, but we want to build a community, not just a house or a complex. So what we want to do, and I've said it before that I'm a mayor, and nobody in this room wants to live in a house that I built, trust me. I make a good rum and coke, but you don't want to live in something I built, that's for sure.
That's true.
And it's not a criticism against any federal party. We all want the housing. We all want to provide a good quality of life to all Canadians. And what we've been saying all week, and what I've been saying for a year as president, is we want to partner up with every party, with the provinces, with the federal government, and work together as a Canadian team to solve our problems and build a better future for all Canadians. And that's what we're here for. So we're going to go have a meeting and have some fun discussions. In all honesty, you know, we can disagree without being disagreeable. And I know that about this man here, and I know he does. He's an ex-mayor and an ex-councillor. He understands some of the troubles that we have to deal with on the ground. And it's to me, you're the true leaders of Canada. So thank you to all of you for everything you do.
Very good.